Steve Gardner from USA Today does a great job covering baseball, kind enough to join me as he does every week. How you been, Steve?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's start with the Mets real quick, trading off Bruce to Cleveland. And we talked about some of the teams that might need that bat, and I mentioned Kansas City. I know you mentioned Cleveland as well. I don't think it's a surprising move. I guess the question is, when you look at this, if the Mets were really interested in moving Bruce and trying to get something back, and there was some talk that they were talking to the Yankees, having conversations with the Yankees and Cashman, and then the Yankees call them back, and the Mets don't even return the call, what's the point of even trying to deal with them if you're really not interested? Like, why even reach out?
Yeah, I don't know. It sounded like the sticking point in the deal or any talks with the Yankees is that the Yankees didn't want to pay any or just a portion of the contract that Bruce was still owed. Now, he's a free agent at the end of the season, so his $13 million or whatever doesn't have a whole lot left on it. The Indians were willing to pick all of that up, and really, from what I understand, the prospect that they gave up in the deal was a nominal guy, a fringe prospect, if anything. So it was really, it sounds like to me, the classic salary dump where the Mets just wanted to get rid of Bruce and get his money off the books. And so they did, rather than, maybe having an opportunity to pick up a couple of prospects. We don't know who they were that the Yankees were offering, but from all indications they were slightly better than who they got from the Indians.
Yeah, and that's Ryder Ryan, 22-year-old 30th round draft pick out of Cleveland University of North Carolina. And by all accounts, listen, management with Cleveland says this kid, it could be a major league ready arm in the bullpen. Of course, they got to say that.
Right.
They're not going to say anything negative. But with the Indians, look, they get a corner outfielder. You get an established bat. I think the timing's perfect. I'm just wondering if Brantley doesn't go on the DL, do the Mets make this move?
I don't know. The thing is, the Indians have been having trouble with Lonnie Chisenhall being out. Hasn't been in the lineup since the All-Star break. Has had a couple of stints on the disabled list. Really, I don't know if they felt like they could count on him. So what you end up with is, if you're Cleveland, you're looking at guys like Brandon Guyer, Abraham Almonte, Austin Jackson. Okay, but certainly not playoff caliber. And to get Jay Bruce, it gives them, a big bat in the lineup, a power bat. And the Indians don't hit a whole lot of home runs, considering, how good they were offensively last year. And Edwin Encarnacion is there. Otherwise, they really don't hit a whole lot of home runs. So he gives them something that they needed. And with Brantley going on the DL, I think it made it almost it stepped up the sense of urgency for Cleveland. So it was a good move for them from a personnel standpoint. And it was also kind of an important move for them just because they needed the depth.
We'll save the Phillies for last, but you look at the Los Angeles Dodgers right now, 80-33. I know they had this type of run too last year, but it just seems as though it's, I don't want to say more exaggerated this year. It's just so impressive. And then you look from top to bottom with this lineup, and you look at Bellinger, you look at the year that Turner has, who was certainly an NL MVP candidate. I mean, just overall, when you look at this team, I mean, is this a product of, again, just a ridiculous 2 or 3 months of baseball? Because we know they're legit. I guess my concern with this team is always going into the postseason, right? And it goes back to Kershaw. We know the year that Wood is having, but how legit is this team right now? Are they the best team in baseball, or does that distinction still go to the Houston Astros?
No, I think they are. And the addition of Yu Darvish was huge for them because of the questions in the starting pitching rotation. With Clayton Kershaw out, how they don't want to push him coming back, certainly. And this move was done with an eye toward the postseason, because last year they kind of pushed Kershaw a little bit. They didn't want to have to pitch him on short rest. And I think with Darvish as their number 2, they don't have to do that now. So they can pick and choose from among whoever's healthy. That's been the one issue with the Dodgers rotation, is they've spent a lot of time on the disabled list. Now, whether all of those were legitimate injuries, we can argue about that later. But they've had a lot of guys in and out of the rotation. So you can pick between Alex Wood and Rich Hill and Brandon McCarthy and Kenta Maeda as you need to, knowing that Kershaw and Darvish are going to be 1 and 2. I think that's what makes this team so much better. Yeah, we're talking right now, as the Dodgers are relatively healthy. They still have Adrian Gonzalez, who's on the disabled list.
Yep.
And if he comes back and is a pinch hitter off the bench in the postseason, that's just a huge weapon for them. So this is a team that's primed for the postseason. It may end up winning a historically large number of games. They could threaten the 116 that the 0-1 Mariners had. I think they're that good. And, yeah, the postseason is the big question, but I think this team is built much, much better for the postseason than any of the previous Dodger teams that ended up winning division titles.
Now, listen, you know this, right? They can win 115, 116. You don't want to have the same outcome that the Mariners did that year. I mean,
no.
How do you explain Justin Turner? Like, I look at that lineup, and, you go back, and this is a guy that was kind of a journeyman drafted by the Reds. I know he was traded as well to the O's, and then he was selected by the Mets off waivers from Baltimore, and then he was a free agent, and then he signed with the Dodgers a couple years ago. I mean, is he, first of all, how do you explain the season he's having in the last couple of years, and is he more important as an offensive cog, if you will, an offensive piece of that puzzle with that lineup than a guy like Bellinger or, just explain Turner for a minute and what he's been able to do?
Yeah, no, he's one of those guys that, first of all, he's been relatively healthy since he joined the Dodgers. And that's big, number one. But he's one of those guys that we hear a lot about the fly ball revolution and players that want to get the ball in the air. He was one of the first and the earliest adopters. I look at Josh Donaldson, Justin Turner, and guys like that who just started to realize, maybe before a lot of the other people that we've seen, how getting the ball in the air is the key toward doing damage. And as he's been more and more of a fly ball hitter, he's hit more home runs, he's driven in more runs, the slugging percentage has gone up, and now he's in that career high in terms of all of the slash categories. Batting average, is way up there, but on base percentage as well, slugging percentage. It's just been a magical year for him, and I think it's just part of refining his approach at the plate and what works for him, and hitting those fly balls and finding gaps in the outfield, hitting it over the fence. That's worked well for him, and he's been able to adapt his swing to do the maximum amount of damage.
He's a legitimate MVP candidate.
Oh, yeah, I think so. And, I think the one thing that's working against him was that he was hurt for a little bit earlier in the season, so he's not going to get the totals that you'll see from the Bryce Harpers and Paul Goldschmidts for the season. But in terms of the averages and the slash lines and all of that, he certainly is, I think, the most important. Bellinger is probably important as well, but one of the two most important offensive cogs in the Dodgers lineup right now.
All right, there's talk that the Phillies are getting ready, or en route is Hoskins, the highly touted prospect, a ton of power. We saw his numbers in AAA, smacking home runs all over the place. I'd revert back to Lazinski in 71 with some of the numbers this kid is putting up. When you look at the Phillies, and we know Alfaro's having his issues as well, and we saw Reese can play first. He can play in left field. It just almost seems as though with Alumni Weekend, they're playing bad baseball. You got a 4-game set against the Mets. It just seems like everything, it's kind of the perfect storm, right? And plus, I hate to say this, but the passing of Daulton, kind of a somber week. You want to at least give maybe the fans a little bit to hang their hat on. So I kind of think it's a perfect storm, an opportunity for this kid to step in and see if he can get some at-bats for the next, you got another month of the season left for the Phillies.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect opportunity for him. I mean, there's no pressure or anything like that. We just want to see what he can do, because he's sort of proved everything he needs to at AAA. Hitting 29 home runs, almost 100 RBIs already this season. Was in the All-Star Futures game. I got a chance to talk to him at the Futures game as well, and he seems like, at least at this point, he's ready in every sense of the word. So, yeah, sure, let's get him a chance. I think it's kind of tough to throw him in there and say, you're playing left field and learn this on the job and as a major leaguer. I think that's kind of difficult to ask for the youngster. But anyway, I don't think the expectations defensively are there. I think we want to see, and the Phillies want to see exactly what he can do, get his feet wet, and maybe that gives him a bit of a jump on the learning curve going into next season.
All right, two more before I let you get out of here, and two on the passing of Darren, Daulton, and Don Baylor. Start with Baylor, we'll end with the Phillies and Daulton. I've read and I researched, I guess 267 times he was hit by a pitch, and he only charged him out twice. which is a rarity. And as he's a manager, he said, listen, you guys charge the mound. You get hit by a pitch, you're going to be suspended for 5 games. But you look at Baylor, 79 MVP, put together a really nice career. And I know there was some talk a couple years ago he might be a good candidate for the Phillies as Phillies job as a manager. But, he quietly put together a really nice career, Don Baylor.
He did. And I can remember him when I was an Orioles fan from like infancy almost. So I can remember him playing for the Orioles. And, he was one of those guys I think that was built for the DH role. Yep. And even though I think he stole a handful of bases earlier in his career, but as he got older, he was the perfect DH.
Had 52 one year. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he was indestructible, and the fact that you could put him in the lineup every single day, you didn't have to worry about any defense or anything like that, and he would give you that production. He was, a consummate RBI guy in my mind, and I think the mentality of, just show up, be professional, and if the ball hits you, no big deal, it's part of the game. He was quite a figure in baseball history, and yeah, as you mentioned, an MVP even. So that just goes to show the different things that he could do.
I got about 30 seconds because we're tight hitting the top of the hour. You look at that 93 team, and just quietly, Dutch kind of went about his business, but then really took over that leadership role. Then goes to the Marlins, bats 389 in the World Series, finally gets his ring. But, to me, he's one of those faces when you think of 93, he was kind of that engine that could with that team and really set the table for that offense and really is a leader.
Yeah, indeed. And one of 2 guys to bat fourth in his final game in the 7th game of a World Series, or the last game of a World Series. The other guy to do that, Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
So pretty good company.
And he will be missed. Two very good humans. And hell of a player too for both those guys, Baylor and of course Dutch Daulton passing away this week. Both of them succumbing to cancer as well. Steve, always appreciate it, my friend. Have a good week. Enjoy the weekend. We will talk next week. And pennant race is heating up. I always appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you.
All right.